Hello, everybody. Scotty the Trainer here. Thank you very much for joining me for Scotty the Trainer. So, how's everybody doing there in quarantine in this COVID-19 nation? How's everybody hanging on, hanging in? How's things going? Learning your family members, remembering why it is you love them, the things you love about them, the things you don't love about them. Close quarters for a long period of time. It's going to test your parameters and how much you really love somebody. Hopefully you're still reaching out and hugging them. Even if you're hugging them around the neck, at least you still are hugging them. You know, I wanted to just drop in as my weekly check-in and just say that during this time of quarantine, you know, there's a lot of talk now. There's a lot of stuff that's being generated now. The president and our nation's leaders and our governors are coming together, mayors of cities, and they're starting to talk about now looking at reopening and how are we going to do it. We phase in this and phase in that. And people are really starting to feel anxious. You know, my wife took our oldest boy, still at home, Jacob, took him to the doctor today for his regular checkup, and my wife asked, how's things going? And the doctor said, you know, we've been sending people home because we haven't been seeing anybody. They're not coming. And my wife asked the question, well, have you seen any COVID cases? And she said, no, we haven't even seen regular cases of people coming in because everybody is scared. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a nurse that works at Riverside in the ER, and I said, well, you must really be busy with this COVID situation. And she said, no, not really. She said, I've been scheduled for 12-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, and I've gone home early. She says, we haven't seen a ton of these people. I have a friend of mine that works for a food delivering service, and he was going to Mount Carmel East, out not too far from where we live here, and he said, I figured it was going to be jammed and all these people. And he said, I walked in, Scotty, he said, man, it was like a ghost town. And I came upon one of the ER techs that came out to pay for the food. And I said, man, I thought you guys would be overrun. And he said, no, we're not seeing it. Yet other people are talking about how, you know, in New York, there's this massive overrun of people. And so there's all this information going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So there's a restlessness, and there's a cautiousness. More people are walking around now with masks on, and you know, it's a time. It's still a strange time. It's still a weird time. And I started thinking about, you know, we go back to a great story of a man by the name of David. David, who's also known as the psalmist, matter of fact, if you have a Bible, you probably will leaf through it. If you have an Old Testament, most of the time it's the Old Testament and Psalms. And the book of Psalms is attributed to the psalmist, which is David. And so the story of David is that, of course, he was king of Israel, and a lot of people know the story of young David when he killed Goliath and all of the great accomplishments. But prior to being king, there was a man by the name of Saul that was king. And Saul disobeyed, had a lot of issues. The end of his reign was a lot worse than the beginning. And Saul was troubled by evil spirits, and he called for a young man by the name of David to come in and play his harp, and it would soothe his soul. Well, one day Saul called in for David, and he got so irritated that he grabbed a javelin and he threw it at David, and he started to make a promise to David. He said, I will chase you everywhere until I kill you. Now, David was destined for the throne. There was no question about it. Israel's destiny lied in the life of David. David was anointed by a prophet. Now, when you're anointed by a true prophet, I mean, something's going to happen. And so David was anointed by a man by the name of Samuel, who happened to be the prophet of Israel. Samuel comes in, he takes his horn of oil, opens it up and pours it over David's head. And there's a great story in there, but I'll not go into it at this moment because there's another point I want to drive at. And David is anointed as king. It is destined. The oil was poured. The official ceremony took place. But the next day, David did not get up, put on kingly garments, and then go to the kingdom and sit on the throne to rule as the Prince of Bel-Air or King of Israel. That's not what happened. The next day, David continues on with his life because there's still a sitting king, Saul. And the time comes that as David grows and his popularity grows, even the people in the town are singing this song. They're saying, King Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his tens of thousands. And so the sitting king, Saul, hates David. And he chases David. He sends out men and he puts a bounty on David's head. And he says, I want him dead. Reminds me of Robert De Niro playing Al Capone in the movie The Untouchables, when they find out that Elliot Ness is not dead. And Al Capone stands up and says, I want him dead. I want his family dead. I want his house burned to the ground. I want to stand in the ashes. I'll not finish the line, but he basically is saying this kid's got to go. David was anointed, but here's the thing I want to give you. He was anointed, but the time was not appointed yet. He had an anointing and a call and a sense, but he wasn't appointed yet. The appointed time had not come. He was anointed, but he was not appointed, and they had not linked up as of yet. And that's what I think is going on right now. We as people are not destined to live secluded. And that's what's happened. Even though businesses, we have Zoom meetings and we have, we can teleconference and we can do all of these things. But we as people were built for interpersonal connections. Now, thank goodness for technology. Thank goodness for all these things we have. But we are destined for connection. That's why we have friends. We have best friends, A real friend is different than a Facebook friend. A Facebook friend is somebody you see, they can like, not like, blah, blah, blah. But a real friend is somebody you sit down with, you have a meal with, you talk to them and things like that. We as people quarantine is not a lifestyle for us as people. And so there's a churning, there's a burning, there's a shift right now. There are people that are we're not rioting in the streets, but there are demonstrations in the streets saying, open up the city, open up the world, because we as people are destined to want to have that interconnections. Do you know that there were two places when America was established by our forefathers? There were two places that were open. The first one was a church house because we wanted to worship together. The second one was essentially a restaurant or a bar or a pub. A church house to worship, a pub for us to fellowship together. And that's where pub came from, public places. Because that's what we want. We know that. It's the anointing on us. The outpouring of our being is to be amongst other people, to walk the streets and to be among other people and to go to work and to interact and to do these things. That anointing is in us and it's rising up within the people now that we need to be together. But here's the thing. The appointment hasn't come yet. The all clear has not sounded yet. I know people are itching for things to get back to normal. Every time I say that, I always say, we want to get back to normal, whatever that is. We are anointed to be a community of people, but the appointed time hasn't come as of yet. But hold tight, because as sure as we are anointed and that call is there to be among other people, the appointment will come. Hang in there a little longer. We are going to make it. I hope this helps. These are just my thoughts. That's how I see it. But as always, one thing I know for certain, I am Scotty the Trainer.